The Asia-Europe Foundation, ASEF, is an intergovernmental, not-for-profit organization which brings together the people of Asia and Europe to address common global challenges. ASEF works on a diverse range of topics in 7 thematic areas. We contribute to sustainable development by engaging civil society, policymakers, and businesses to foster interregional cooperation between Asia and Europe on sustainable development and climate change. The Asia-Europe Environment Forum, ENV Forum, is a long-standing program aimed at achieving a more sustainable world. Since 2013, ENV Forum has been actively engaged in the global discussion on the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. We launched a program to contribute to the bottom-up process that supports the implementation and monitoring of SDGs. This is based on 3 pillars. 1. Undertaking research on SDGs and their associated indicators. 2. Organizing knowledge hub meetings of experts working on SDGs and indicators, as well as on the green economy. And 3. Disseminating the outcomes of consultations to policymakers. The ENV Forum is a consortium of 5 organizations. In 2020, the ENV Forum will host our first virtual.
Good morning, everybody in Europe, and good afternoon to all of you in Asia. We are delighted to start our webinar titled Single-Use Plastic Never-Ending Story Initiatives in ASEM. This webinar is first of the series of webinars that we prepared towards the Asia-Europe Environment Forum Conference, Creating an Enabling Environment for SDG 12 in ASEM. And on the screen next to me, you can see what we prepared for you and the dates, and we are looking forward to also see you very soon, next week and in 2 weeks at the conference itself. The topics that we will be looking in are related to plastic, single-use plastic initiatives, sustainable garment, as well as inclusive food value chains and health agenda in post-COVID era. Therefore, we are really warmly inviting you to join us. And without any further ado, I would like to pass the floor to my colleague, Nourain Abourazak from Asia-Europe Foundation, that will start this webinar with brief overview of single-use plastic situation in Asia and Europe. Ain, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon to viewers in Asia, and for those from Europe, good morning. Today I'll be giving an overview of single-use plastics in the context of Asia and Europe. Okay, next slide. Single-use plastics are plastic items that are designed and intended for a throwaway purpose. The throwaway mindset has led packaging just one type of single-use plastic itself to take up the largest share of the global plastic production and waste generated. Just imagine, around the world, nearly 1 million plastic beverage bottles are sold every minute. Overconsumption and its mismanagement will lead to 12 billion tons of plastic litter in landfills and natural environment by 2050. Next slide. The overconsumption and mismanagement of single-use plastics have adverse impacts on the environment, social, and economy. The total value of negative externalities just from packaging itself is estimated to be at least 40 billion US dollars and is expected to rise significantly in a business as usual scenario. Next slide. Next, this is a short overview of the production and consumption patterns in Asia and Europe. Firstly, Asian ASEM partners account for more than half of the annual global plastic production, and they take up around 8% share of the global plastic waste generated per day per capita. On the other hand, the European counterparts produces less than 20% of global plastic production. However, they take up 15% share of the global plastic waste generated per day per capita. However, it is important to note that the per capita share will not reflect the total waste generated, as the Asian ASEM countries take up 56% of the global population. There is also a need to take into account the transboundary movements of plastic waste. Although European ASEM countries are generally performing better and have a more effective local plastic waste management infrastructure and capabilities, they export a large amount of plastic waste globally. With the recent banning of plastic imports in China, the top importing countries include Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, and India. Going on to the policies and trends in Asia and Europe, we can see that the regional laws and regulations in Europe has boosted the number of policies and initiatives to reduce the consumption and improve recycling in Europe. Moreover, there is also a rise in product and material innovation and the use of technology. For example, increasing the life cycle of a product through design or recycling or alternatives to plastic as material. As for the Asian ASEM countries, we see that although laws regulating the use of single-use plastics are not as comprehensive as our European counterparts, there are a rising number of businesses voluntarily opting to reduce the consumption of single-use plastics. This may be due to the increased social awareness and public pressure experienced in the region, along with the rise of the civil society initiatives and movements. I will conclude my presentation. Next slide, please. Sorry. I will conclude my presentation with some of the main challenges faced in tackling single-use plastics in Asia and Europe. First, plastic is so intricately intertwined in our lives that it is closely linked with economic growth and the rise in spending power. As such, plastic pollution is further exacerbated in countries where economic growth is outpacing waste management infrastructure development. Next, although governments and industry leaders are attempting to tackle this issue through policies and voluntary initiatives, they are typically narrow in focus or are concentrated in low leakage countries. As such, it is predicted that by 2040, current government and industry commitments will only reduce annual leakage by only 7%. Moreover, plastic waste are being exported from high-income countries which generally have better waste management capacity, stronger policies and regulations to lower-income countries which lack such capacities. While the adopted amendments to the Basel Convention may regulate the transboundary movements better, loopholes or illegal means of exporting and importing waste should be anticipated and monitored. Moreover, the lack of data dampens the monitoring and evaluation efforts on policies enacted or initiatives implemented. Next, for an effective and lasting transformation, a change in behavior and lifestyle is crucial. However, the process is long and gradual. Finally, tackling the plastic issue from its roots is highly complex. Being a highly lucrative industry, we can expect to face influential lobbying groups. As such, there is a need to look at the issue as a system. With that, I come to the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ain. We hope this gave you a very brief overview of what is happening in Asia and Europe. And I just wanted to say that with single-use plastic, this is something we started to work 2 years ago on. And even though it seems to be that everybody knows what to do or what shouldn't be done, still there is an issue in plastic, and there's so many events and so many formats that are looking into how can we move forward with changing the existing situation. Therefore, in Asia Europe Foundation, we decided to look at different kind of initiatives that are happening regarding single-use plastic and in general addressing the issue of waste. And I would like to now invite Dora that would give us a brief overview of the initial situation and the findings that happened during this journey when we were exploring what really needs to be done and what is happening at the moment. Dora, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gina. Good morning, everybody in Europe, and good afternoon, everybody in Asia. My name is Dora Almashi. I'm a researcher at Central European University. And in the last couple of months, we have been working with the Asia Europe Foundation and the Asia Europe Environment Forum on a research that was looking at plastic initiatives across ASEM member countries to understand what drives their implementation, what are their potential barriers, and how can they be scaled up. So my presentation in the next 10 minutes will be based on the outcomes, some of the outcomes of this research. Next slide, please. Next, thank you. So the research is contextualized within the UN Sustainable Development Goals The SDG 12 is focusing on sustainable consumption and production. And within this topic, we looked at various initiatives and various issues, but this specific research was focusing on single-use plastic. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the presentation scope, this current presentation is going to focus on characterizing single-use plastic waste reduction initiatives across ASEM, including their aims, their management setup, scale and size, project activities and types of innovation, of course with a specific focus on the role of businesses. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the research that we did was specifically focusing on initiatives that are bottom-up initiatives run by businesses, NGOs, and other type of institutions such as research institutions or universities. We were looking for projects that are self-sustainable and have been operational for at least 1 year prior to the research. We collected over 100 initiatives. We first carried out a desk research, and this was followed up by a survey. We looked at initiatives in the 51 ASEM partner countries, and the research was done, the desk research and the survey was done between November 2019 and January 2020. Next slide, please. Thank you. And here you can see the countries that have been involved in the research. Basically, they are covering almost all Europe and Asia. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as for the findings from the review, next slide. Thank you. So as for the project objectives of the studied initiatives, we took as a basis the waste hierarchy, where we try to understand and assess their objectives and their activities based on the type of activities they are undertaking according to this waste hierarchy, where the most preferred option is refusal or reduction of the use of single-use plastics, and moving towards down recycling and recovery, which are the least preferred option. The next figure, please. Thank you. So as for the objectives of these over 100 initiatives that we identified across the ASEM member countries, we found that initiatives were equally likely to focus on the actual reduction of using single-use plastics and recycling and collection. So around initiatives could have, of course, multiple objectives, but around almost half of the initiatives were focusing both on the reduction of use and material recycling. Next slide. In terms of their size and the scale, we found that most of these initiatives are run by small and medium-sized organizations, and they had a focus, a more stronger focus on local and national activities. The next figure. Thank you. So as you can see that over 60% of all initiatives were small and medium-sized organizations, and their main focus, almost all initiatives were either having a city level, multi-city scope or a national scope. Next slide. In terms of who was running these initiatives, we have found that almost 70% of these projects were run by actually businesses. So you can see that the role of the businesses in running single-use plastic initiatives are indeed very important and crucial. Next figure. And here you can see that basically various kind of businesses could be running these projects. Recycling companies, retailers, plastic industry companies, social enterprises, technology companies, but also we found initiatives run by insurance companies or consultancies. Next slide. So when we look at the businesses and for-profit organizations, what are their objectives and what are their activities, we found that while the all studied initiatives were more likely to focus on reduction of using single-use plastics, when it came to businesses, they had a much more emphasized focus on recycling and collection. Next figure, please. And this was also translated to activities, because we found that most of the businesses are focusing on delivering changes in product design, improving plastic waste collection, and improving plastic waste recycling. Next slide. Yeah, so also if you compare this to other type of organizations like NGOs and research institutions at universities, you can see that there is a very strong emphasis from the businesses side on working on technological changes. Next slide, please. We also looked at the types of innovations that these projects can deliver, and then you could see that the all studied initiatives that we looked at, these 100 initiatives, they were equally likely to deliver social innovations and technological innovations. But when we looked at what type of innovations businesses delivered, we really saw that product, process, and infrastructural innovations are more likely to come from businesses and for-profit organizations. Next slide, please. So in terms of what kind of innovations they delivered, we found that businesses were often delivered products from recycled plastics, or they develop new products from plastic alternatives, or they develop new type of raw biomaterials that can be used also as plastic alternatives. For example, a Norwegian company called New Movements developed shoes from recycled materials, and Wastewear, which is a Chinese organization, they developed an innovative material for fabrics to develop and produce clothes from these materials. Next slide, please. As for process and infrastructural innovations, we found that many companies are coming up with ways to improve plastic waste collection and recycling processes. Others were developing new technologies for recycling, or upgrading and renewing their infrastructures to collect and recycle plastics better. Next slide. So as for the takeaways in terms of what businesses could bring for single-use plastic waste reduction, we found that many of the initiatives that were run by businesses were in fact small and medium-sized organizations with the focus on local and national level. They focused, or they worked mostly on collecting and recycling already created waste, and they had high potential to deliver product, process, or infrastructural innovations. This tells us that businesses indeed has a crucial role in ASEM and also beyond to take forward innovations to reduce single-use plastics. But we also saw that policies are needed to support the scaling up of their activities and to make sure that changes will happen across the supply chain, and these initiatives will not remain individual standalone initiatives, but they will deliver a systematic change across the production and the consumption chain of single-use plastics. Thank you. So this is from my side, but I would be happy to answer questions, of course, if there is any clarification needs.
Thank you so much, Dora. I just find it very interesting that this is not our first research when we were looking at what is happening in ASEM countries. Usually when we look at the work on the ground, the national initiatives, or what NGOs, businesses, and different even cities are doing, there is a lot of potential for scaling up, and there is a lot of things that are happening that can be easily used to leverage the situation and make it better. But there is somehow always this kind of gap between what can be done and good governance and what is happening regarding policy making. And I think that would be really interested to also hear the business side, so to see from the mouth of the people, both from government, but also from the practitioners on the ground and the company representative itself, how they look at those things. And we kindly invite you to post your questions on the YouTube. What we are going to do, depending on how much time we still have, We will try to accommodate your question as much as possible. However, now I would like to give the floor to Luis Akenji, Executive Director of SEED, that will moderate the panel discussion with our experts representing different sectors. Luis, the floor is yours.
Thank you so very much, Gina. Thank you, everybody, and welcome to this moderated session. I feel especially pleased with the topic. I noticed you talk about single plastic use being a never-ending story. In fact, it is right in the face of sustainability that we have issues with material that is so basic to everyday use. And I think one of the initial presentations talked about the throwaway mindset, which begs the question, is the problem the way we're using the material or the material itself? Do we have a management issue or we have a material problem, or are they the same thing? My name is Luis Akenji. I'm the Executive Director of SEED. And SEED was founded in 2002 as a UN partnership, and its intention is to support entrepreneurship for sustainable development. It works at the intersection of policy and practice, working primarily with small and medium-sized enterprises. You might want to look up some of the practitioner labs that it has on climate finance and policy prototyping. The reason why I'm very excited about this panel today is because it constitutes a lot of the type of actors that we work with: businesses, policymakers, and intermediaries in targeting an issue such as plastics. Before I get into this, it might be worth asking, reflecting a little bit on the previous presentation, which ended up with me asking the question to myself: if we have such problems, or if we have solutions that are not yet scaled, is it that we do not have a convenient environment for addressing this issue, or that we don't yet have viable alternatives to plastics? Have we locked ourselves into a path that we can't come out of? For that, I would like to ask Dora especially a question. From your observations looking at these various practices, these various initiatives, did you find that there's an alignment between the practices that you found with businesses, with NGOs and so on, and the policy objectives set in these countries?
Yes, thank you, Luis, for the question. So indeed, there are many good initiatives across ASEM, and if they are scaled up, as I said at the end of my presentation, if they are scaled up and connected, they can really have the potential to enable a systematic change across the supply and the production and the consumption chain of plastics. But for this, policies really need to support businesses in doing so. There are already policies. We didn't look at this in detail, but the previous research did look at this in more detail. And there are many policies that are supporting the reduction of single-use plastics, but there can be more to be there is more to be done. For example, commitment from businesses' side seem to be an important driving force for reducing plastic waste and using, instead of single-use plastic, alternative materials. But there is a need from the policy side to bring along better regulations. For example, from the research, we found that businesses not necessarily find regulations as an important implementation driver, but they do find it as an important barrier to scale up their activities. So better regulation can help them to scale up their activities, and also more funding to sustain businesses until they become scalable and became profitable was marked as an important driver. Yeah, so policies can be further improved to support change.
Thank you. So we see a typical situation where there are lots of policies, but practice is less clear. And in fact, a situation where where available policies might actually become a barrier rather than facilitating the transition that we're looking for. We have a wonderful panel here that will be exploring all of these. We have Dr. Trang Nguyen, who is the Deputy Director General at the Institute of Strategy and Policies from the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment in Vietnam. We have Mr. Tom Clark, who is an advisor to Switch Asia, and we have Mrs. Jarwan, who is the CEO of Fang Thai, that has been very innovative in tackling this issue face on, and who also happens to be a low carbon award winner of SEED. So you see, we have a mix of policymakers, we have businesses that I dare say have wonderful ideas and innovative ideas, and we have a facilitating organization in the name of Switch. Let's see how the different perspectives come together in moving us forward here. To start off, I would go with Trang from Vietnam and ask, what are some of the experiences you have in shaping policy in Vietnam? And have you been able to articulate, what are some concrete examples or some of the challenges that you face in articulating the problem or in solving it as you find in the context of Vietnam?
Good afternoon, everybody from Vietnam. In Vietnam, plastic waste issue is a pressing one for the time being. As you know, that Vietnam has been estimated as one of the fourth biggest country that discharge the plastic debris into the ocean. So in Vietnam, December last year, the government has adopted the action plan, national action plan on the management of the marine plastic debris, with focus on the four content. The first is to raise awareness of the people and to change the behavior of the people with the plastic products. The second one is to promote the collection, recycling, and treatment of plastic waste at the coastal area. And the third one is to control the plastic pollution from the source. And the fourth is to promote the international collaboration. So there are a lot of initiatives in Vietnam to promote the plastic waste management. I just try to mention the three initiatives. The first one is the government now revising the law on environmental protection, in which the packaging, especially the plastic packaging, will be included in the EPR system, EPR mechanism. This is also a project supported by WWF to support Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment to develop this mechanism. The second initiative I would like to mention is establishment of the packaging recycling organization, which we call shortly PRO. This is an union established by the 13 big companies, including Coca-Cola, Suntory, Pepsi, Tetra Pak, and some others companies. And they committed strongly by 2030 to recycle all the packaging that they provide to the market. And the third initiative, which is our institute, ISPONRE is a partner. We have been funded by the EU through the France expertise to implement a project for reducing the plastic bag in the supermarkets. Within this project, we will try to implement three activities. The first, we will establish the union of the supermarkets with commitment to not to provide the plastic bags to the customers. The second activity focus on try to change the activities of the supermarkets to change their packaging material, plastic packaging material, with other bio and environmentally friendly material. And the third activity is try to do a communication campaign and to change the behavior of the customer when they come and buy at the supermarket. So I very much appreciate the two presentations from our presenters. And I find that challenges in Vietnam now, like Anh mentioned before in the presentation, that I think one of the key challenges for Vietnam is the people still have low income. And why you know that the plastic, single-use plastic products is quite cheap and convenient. So it become a habit to the people. So it try to, it's quite difficult to change the habit of the people, because also from the low income of the people in Vietnam. So I think that's one of the challenge. Then the other challenge is, I think that we have a limited resource or to implement. For example, we have design an action plan, but how and where we can get the resource to implement all the activities successfully. For example, how can we do inventory and collection and clean up all the beaches in Vietnam, and to know exactly how much plastic waste we discharge into the ocean. That's still a big challenge for us. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Trang. You articulate very clearly some of the challenges that you're facing in Vietnam. And I dare say these challenges can be seen across several countries. It's not a far stretch to say plastics and the oceans are connecting lands in the world right now in ways that we never really expected. To reflect a bit more on this and to see how our theme is developing, I'd like to talk to Tom, who is working with Switch Asia, and to reflect a bit on the experiences they're having with Pakistan in addressing the issue of single-use plastics. Tom, I'm especially interested in understanding how a country that might have already lots of issues to address is prioritizing an issue such as single-use plastics.
Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone from Australia. As Lewis mentioned, I'm working with Switch Asia as consultant, and Switch Asia, as you know, is helping Asian countries to implement sustainable consumption and production. The particular project I'm working on for Pakistan is to raise awareness of good practice in waste and plastics management, drawing on experience and lessons from the European Union and carefully considering how they might be applied in Pakistan. The scale of the problem is significant enough for the Pakistan government to recognize that single-use plastic bags are a problem, and recognizing this, a year ago they implemented a ban on single-use plastics, except for certain exceptions, say for hospital waste. And part of the project, besides developing a wider strategy and policies for Pakistan, is to assess this single-use ban, identify the barriers and challenges, and to identify the way forward, especially working with stakeholders. So part of the project is surveying stakeholders, working with them with the aim of developing positive and innovative ways forward. And a lot of focus is going to be on working with business on innovation, I think. There have been serious problems in implementation, resistance from consumers and certain types of businesses, but the details will come out in the survey, and we're very hopeful that we can find a positive way forward.
Thank you so much, Tom, for that. In fact, we begin to see a pattern here after the intervention from both Tom and Trang. On the one hand, we see lessons from solid waste management being brought into addressing the plastics, the single-use plastics issue. And a question begins to arise. Do approaches such as bans work? Or do they corner us into areas where the problem resurfaces in other ways? I put this out for reflection as we go further into discussions here. Now, I'd like to move to a bit more of a concrete example of someone that is working to find viable alternative to single-use plastics. That would be Jaroan from Phang Thai. Phang Thai actually, I proudly say, is one of the low carbon award winners of the SEED award program. And they've taken something that is so common to a place like Thailand, rice straw, and asked the question of how this can be a resource rather than waste, and how can it tackle one of the bigger problems that we have in terms of packaging. And I would like Jaroan to talk to us a little bit more about the business experience here, but also looking at whether the policy environment is supporting these types of small and medium-sized enterprises, or it might actually be in the way of success. Jaroan, it's
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jaroan. I am the CEO of Phang Thai Factory. Phang Thai Factory, we, as you know, that the main occupations in Thailand is agricultural. After the harvest season, rice straw is the issue in Thailand because mostly the farmer will burn the rice straw in the open field. It's causing a lot of smoke, air pollution, and PM2.5. And Phang Thai, we would like to convert the crisis into opportunity. Therefore, we try to develop the machine to convert the rice straw into the virgin pulp. We buy the rice straw from the farmer and we produce the rice straw pulp. Therefore, we can produce the tableware or the packagings from rice straw. Both are secondary packagings and the primary packagings. Nowadays, as we see that throughout the world, we concern about the environment, and it is very good opportunity. As I observed during the COVID-19, even we cannot go to other countries to promote our product, but nowadays people around the world contact us. For example, when this program sent DW to filming, and the people see us from YouTube and they try to contact. Nowadays, I cannot open my website because people around the world try to contact us. But as you know that we are startup, nowadays the one thing that's very big problems for us is about the capacity, and the company in Thailand or around the world, we already have the molding company. The molding company or the plastic company would like to change their product, like they would like to change the material from plastic to biodegradable material. And the existing company is very big company. When we are the raw material supply and we are startup, this is the big problem because the gap between the material supply and the molding company is very big. And one thing nowadays I think that the biodegradable packaging market is very huge, and around the world, such as India or Vietnam, they are also interested in this project. Like in India, they also occur the same problems like in Thailand, because mostly the farmer will burn the rice straw. Now we try to find the ways to collaborations.
Thanks so much, Jaroan. It's wonderful to see that sometimes innovation is not about going so far to get an idea, but really just to look around you and see very basic material and rethink how to apply it in society. Some of the examples you some of the challenges you bring to the forefront are especially critical as we try to solve this problem. You've talked about people contacting you from different countries. I would like to throw this to Trang, because I know that Vietnam as a country has tried a lot to look at this from a broader perspective than just at a national level. It's seen plastics as a transnational issue, something that needs to be addressed together with its neighbors. Can you try and give me sort of an indication of how Vietnam is going about a more multilateral or international approach to addressing single-use plastics?
Yes, Luis. But before to answer the question, I am very much interested and appreciate the presentation from colleague from Thailand, from Jaruan. I think very, very interesting, and I think we should learn from Thailand for this initiative. In Vietnam, in Hanoi especially, almost every year, people in sub-urban area, they burn the rice straw and cause a lot of pollution to the inner part of the city. And making from rice straw to making packaging material and other useful material is very, very interesting and useful for us. Now to the question of Luis about the Vietnam initiative. So in 2017, in the G7 meeting, our Prime Minister promised that to promote an initiative on the regional collaboration in terms of to address the marine debris issue. And later on last year in the National Action Plan, this policy has been regulated as an activity in the action plan, in which saying that we will establish an international center for marine debris for ocean plastic waste, and I would like to inform that the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment has developed the proposal for establishment of this international center to the government, and it is now in the process for appraisal and approval of this proposal. Actually, this international center will be an agency or an unit belong to the Vietnam administration for sea and islands, which is belong to the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment. And this international center will have a task to collaborate and sharing information and organizing workshop, conference, and implementing the project with the ASEAN countries and other countries in the world. And through this center, we would like a hub for sharing information on the plastic waste issues and marine debris within the region, especially with those countries that has common sea and ocean with Vietnam, and to promote understanding and sharing innovation, technological innovation, guidelines on how to do inventory on plastic waste, and to join together to implement the regional project on the marine debris management. So we estimated that this center would be approved by the mid of the next year, 2021. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. I hope we need to talk after this. I hope SEED can help you. We can bring some of our tools on board to help in facilitating the establishment of such a center, which is so clearly needed. I'd like to, there's a number of questions coming from listeners, from participants on YouTube, and I'd like to direct a few of them. From Sunil Herod, I'd like to ask Dora. Dora, this one might be a very interesting one for you. There's a lot of discussion around extended producer responsibility as an approach to addressing plastic waste. How much of this did you come across in your research, and how much would you say is actually effective in tackling the issue? This is one of the questions from YouTube. If you can be brief, that would be very helpful to address other questions as well.
Yeah, thank you. This is a very good question. And we did look at in the research whether extended producer responsibility is helping businesses to tackle the issue and acting as a driving force. And we found that there were some initiatives, especially in Europe, who were considering this as an important implementation driver for their initiatives, but it didn't come across as a very crucial one. And I think the reason for this may be that it's not used widely yet. So it's a promising mechanism, but further work is needed to see how this can be used effectively. Yeah. So this is what we found.
Thank you very much, Dora. I also note during your presentation something that you said, which quite caught my attention. That on the one hand, businesses tend to see technology as a solution, and have another camp, which is NGOs and other non-profit organizations looking at reduction in use of plastics as a potential solution. That's quite an interesting observation from your research. I'd like to go to, yes, please. Did you want to comment on that?
Say that this was indeed very interesting. So our organizations where the extended producer responsibility came up as an important implementation driver were not the businesses, but NGOs or other not-for-profit organizations.
All right, thank you so much. Tom from Switch Asia, and again, you're working in Pakistan, which is quite fascinating. You mentioned that there's not enough buy-in from the public in Pakistan, and that early initiatives are not very successful because the public is not very cooperative. And there's an interest in understanding how much is really the role of the public here in a context where families and households have so much more to address in terms of everyday living. How much attention can they really give to an issue like plastic? Do you want to comment?
It's an excellent question. It's part of every, whichever strategy you adopt, whether it's regulatory bans or voluntary agreements, you need to raise awareness of the importance of the issue. And there has been some good progress, especially children are concerned about the environment. But the problem in Pakistan is that there wasn't sufficient awareness raised. I have to say that the ban has just been in the federal capital of Islamabad, not across the nation. And there's always a problem of leakage if you try and localize a ban. But aside from that, there wasn't a lot of awareness. There was some, but not obviously enough awareness raising. There was some provision of alternative reusable bags, but not enough. And you've got to have all the things right together, and then there's always the problem of enforcement of free riders, and there just aren't enough resources to enforce, and maybe the penalties weren't enough, or they were too great. But the problem is particular sectors of the economy. I think they've managed to get cooperation from supermarkets and bigger vendors and the bigger producers, but it's the street vendors who've just been ignored, and they're just carrying on using plastic lightweight bags just without any controls at all. So that's brought the scheme into disrepute, and it seems that plastic bags are being used increasingly now, whereas and negating the early successes. So whatever scheme you have, it's a bit of a cliche. You need to think it out well in advance and get all the stakeholders on board, and really be clear about the objectives.
Thank you so much. Be clear about your objectives and get stakeholders on board. That is quite a clear message coming out from you. There's another question from a participant, a very close colleague of ours, Switch Asia, Yana Zhirkova, and the question is about SMEs. It generally, I will reframe this question a little bit, Yana. It's asking whether SMEs sometimes actually do harm to the environment by producing hazardous waste as a byproduct of their activities, which are meant to come out with products that are alternatives to single-use plastics. Do you see this as a part of the problem? Jarwan, that question was for you. I will reframe because it seems like it wasn't clear. The question is whether SME activities in producing plastic alternatives could actually end up harming the environment. There's a follow-up question to it, which is whether there's a need for businesses to change their production mechanism entirely if they're going to work on alternatives to plastics. Those are, I would prefer you concentrate on the first one and give us a brief answer because it might end up being too long.
For alternative, I think like for example in Thailand, when I produce the alternative material, and we work with the plastic company. In the past, the plastic company they produce the products from plastic. And when the policy is changed, that they try to adjust themselves, and they adjust some part of the machine, and they change the raw material. When they sell the plastic product, the sale volume is decreased because of the policy to ban to use the plastic. But when they change the new materials like the rice raw virgin pork, they can find out the new customer and they can increase their sales again. Yes.
Thank you so much, Jarwan. I also noticed something about your business model, which is very interesting, that you've chosen to work only with businesses that have a similar value orientation to yours, rather than encouraging other businesses that might be polluting. I think that as a principle of how to operate within the supply chain is a particularly interesting approach to making sure that this becomes system-wide rather than isolated to individual businesses. I will now go back to all the panelists to ask for, in the interest of time, if you have 1 minute to reflect from your perspective, from the perspective of business, from the perspective of a policymaker or an intermediary, on the way forward. I will start with Trang. My question would be, given what you've outlined here, what do you see as a possible practical step as a way forward?
Well, I think that in the case of Vietnam, I think that we might learn the lesson from Pakistan, that we should completely ban the use of, for example, the single-use, the plastic bags. Because I think that when the government provides such a ban, then the market will appropriately reflect and change to other alternative material and alternative products to replace. In our action plan and our strategy, we set a roadmap to 2026. And after 2026, there should not be plastic bag produced and consumed. And instead that we will try to replace with other alternative. And I think producers are now starting to find the solution on this ban, this policy.
A very ambitious goal there, but I do hope for the sake of all of us that it works, and we can all learn from Vietnam. Tom, because you were referenced by Trang, I would move to you next. Any practical next steps that you see, for example, in Pakistan?
Yes, it's a priority to, I'll just repeat that you need to have the objective that we need to eliminate them. They're a disaster for the environment, but you have to do it in stages. So agree, get the stakeholders together and get a timetable for implementation and a mix of approaches, awareness, bans, and voluntary agreements for addressing different parts of the problem.
Thank you, Tom. And to Dora, I have a bit more specific question, because we're dealing with Europe, Asia under ASEM. I'd like to ask you if you see any practical way of making the solutions-oriented approach or connection between these two a little stronger than we currently see.
Yeah, so I think governments do have a lot of means in their hands to support businesses in upscaling their activities and making a systematic change. But for this, it would be very useful to study further how and which are those means that are efficient, and those policies, those regulatory mechanisms and so on, which are not that efficient, how can they be further improved and evolved? And it would be very interesting to look at further how extended producer responsibilities or other market mechanisms can be evolved and improved, or how public procurement can address single-use plastic waste problems better. So these would be the areas where I would do some further research and try to support policy improvements.
Looking forward to it. Last but not least, Jaroan, you've shown us clearly lots of innovation, lots of potential, but scaling is really a huge problem here. What do you think needs to be done for this ecosystem to facilitate examples such as the one you're working on to become more mainstream? You have 1 minute to address this entire world's problem, so I'll leave it to you.
For me, I think as we start the business from zero, we are startup, and from our experience, if we have a lot of innovations to produce the virgin pulp. I started the business for 7 years ago. Until today, we can find the potential market. But now today, the important problem is we cannot scale up, because like our business is the small business, and the potential market that we met is the big business. Therefore, nowadays we cannot how can we continue working in the market for the biodegradable packagings and for the sustainable materials. I see a lot of opportunity and a chance in the market. Like in Thailand, sometimes startups cannot reach with the financials, such as for the bank. As I am the daughters of the farmer's family, when we go to talk with the banks will ask a lot of guarantee, but I have just three rice of lands of the rice field. This is very obstacles for startup, and It's very obstacle from startup that from the poor family. Even though we see the potential market, but we cannot do anything more than this, because in the past 7 years, we spent a lot of money for the research, for the innovations, until we can produce the products that can satisfy the customer, and we can find the potential customer, and we see a loss of market value. But I don't know how to say. Yes.
Well, you give a very succinct example of why we need to rethink our economic approach to this kind of solutions, and why we need to really inject a lot of support into the more viable small and medium-sized enterprises as yours, and rather than putting a lot of resource into highly established businesses that are locked into a polluting mode. Well, we had just 30 minutes for this conversation. I think there's so much material that has come out, but it's just at the very surface of this topic. We need to start getting a little bit deeper and into the practicalities of this. I do thank ASEM very much for hosting this. I hope that we've dug up some material for you to use, and I hope that together with the panelists, we can start working towards a more constructive approach in addressing this. So thank you very much. I'll pass it back to you, Gina.
I would like to thank all the panelists and you, Luis, for excellent moderation. And I just would like to say, if there was such an easy solution that during one conversation we can actually map it out and then do the research and scale it up, we would have been already doing this. Therefore, I just would like to say that looking at this challenge related with single-use plastic, that when it first was introduced, it was such a magic solution to most of the problems, cheap, durable, makes it so much easier for us to operate, improved so many business operations, and so on and so forth. And now we are really facing a lot of challenges that are a result of this convenience that we got used to. So we will be continuing this discussion at our conference that is on 9 to 11 November, when we will have dedicated to single-use plastic session, when we would like to look at the possible options that we could explore further and pack it into something that would be a policy brief with policy options that will allow us to reach out to ASEM governments, because this is kind of a role of Asia Europe Foundation, that we are trying to connect voices from the society and businesses, listen to governments, but also then bring it back to the table and explore explore as much as we can and make this link to see how this agenda is moving forward and what can be done in order to contribute to solving this issue, because I think it will still take some time and a lot of innovation, ideas, effort, change of the behavior, and so on and so forth, to really say we make a progress and be proud of what has happened. And thank you so much, everyone. I know you were asking a lot of questions. We will get back to everybody that participated. Visit our website and stay tuned for the further updates. And we are looking very much to further talk to you at other occasions brought to you by ASEF. Thank you so much.